Good morning, good afternoon, good evening, wherever you are in the world. I want to thank you for joining us today. I'm Dr. Saralyn Mark, CEO and founder of SolaMed Solutions, which is a commercial space medicine company with a mission to improve human health and performance on Earth and space using precision technologies and working with a very multidisciplinary leadership team. One of the members of our team is Dr. Michelle Hailey. We also know her as Ambassador Hailey, or Her Excellency. She has many titles. Michelle and I are colleagues and good friends. I've known her for over 17 years. We met in Washington, D.C. She's also a member of the Community Outreach Committee for iGiant, which is my nonprofit. It's an acronym for the impact of gender sex on innovation and novel technologies. We are the only nonprofit accelerator for gendered innovation in the world. To give a bio description of Dr. Hailey, it would take probably most of this event. So I'm just going to very highlight her activities. Dr. Hailey is an innovator. She's an entrepreneur. She's a speaker. She's a professor, and she's a humanitarian. Ambassador Hailey has her MBA, which she received from the Schilling University in Paris, France. She also has her PhD, which she received from the Chicago School of Professional Psychology. She has taught many leadership programs and courses around the world, has worked with various countries, including France, Korea, Peru, Dubai, as well as Kenya. We have had the opportunity to work together on many programs to advance diversity, equity, and inclusion, leadership, as well as cultural competence. So it's my great pleasure to introduce and bring to our screen Ambassador Dr. Michelle Hailey. Welcome.
Thank you so much, my friend and colleague. I appreciate that so much. That's a great intro. Excited to be here.
Well, welcome. And what we're going to do today is we're going to have a fireside chat, but we're going to do it with the assistance of some PowerPoint. So Dr. Hailey's going to put on the screen some of her slides. We're going to walk our way through this for about 45 minutes, but I want you to think about questions because we will have time at the end to entertain them. And this is your opportunity to talk to Dr. Hailey to get her wisdom and advice. As you can see from the opening slide, she carries so many different roles. And I'm going to throw it over to you, Michelle, to do your opening reflection.
Thank you so much, Sarah. I appreciate that. This platform is really just super exciting for me, for us to be able to have this opportunity to share with you and to just kind of spend this time. And the thing that I like to just really always look at is just some kind of reflecting. And we're talking beyond borders, right? So what happens when leadership extends beyond the titles, beyond geography, and beyond ourselves? And so that's really what I want to just kind of lay as the foundation for the discussion that we're going to have today.
So, Michelle, you have worked across many continents. It's been a really diverse career. I think for you, you've always had a North Star, and I'd like for you to share with us what some of those key directional guidelines have been for you.
Well, it's interesting because as you see here, my story really begins with purpose. And it starts back to my upbringing. I grew up in southern New Jersey in the Cherry Hill area, right outside of Philadelphia. And most of my family is there. And we were really always rooted in community, whether it be around, our church and faith, family, friends, that was always kind of the core and rooted in service. And so everyone in the family, served, whether it was in church or whether it was, in their role. And a large majority of my family are educators. And so education was always like a really great thing and just kind of a core. And really with educating, it's like not just getting information, but using that to empower yourself and other people, and as well as being able to serve in that capacity. So it's about educating minds, empowering communities, building bridges across cultures, and creating opportunities for other people to thrive. And I think that outside of my community, it really launched because we would always travel and go to different places. And I remember when I was 8 years old was my first international trip. I just thought I was, so grown and mature at the time. And we went to the Bahamas, Freeport, Bahamas for vacation, and just being able to see other cultures, experience other foods, interact with other peoples, that just really opened, my mind in terms of like, okay, what is the purpose, and really the community and empowering. And so really my personal leadership philosophy is each one, reach one, teach one.
It's a really important philosophy. And as we go through your time today, I want to hear some examples of how you did it. I just have to bring up, you talked about meals in the space station, for example, and even down in Antarctica, groups come together to eat. And it's, in a sense, meal diplomacy. We
Yes.
have a need to eat, but we also get to share our culture by what we enjoy. And I think we can underestimate that. So I love the fact that you've often said, the world is my classroom. And if you're not continually teaching and learning, then life gets really, really boring.
For
So can you
sure.
talk a little bit about how you've used this global community to be your classroom?
Yeah, I mean, global engagement is so important, right? And today's leaders really need to we operate in that global environment. And I mean, just the fact that we are on this platform right now, going around the world, is just speaks volumes to the fact that, we have a global environment. And the reason why it's so important is because, you know, connection and personal relationship really builds trust, it builds bridges, it builds collaborative, just connection. And being able to do that just really helps people to, you know, to make progress and make impact. And so, in my mind, it really requires cultural intelligence, being able to be adaptive and have global awareness, know what's going on in the world, and just really kind of being sensitive also to what's happening in different cultures and, with the different people around the world. And as I mentioned, building relationships, it's so super important, because when people trust you, when people feel a connection, when they feel that you kind of have an idea as to, or have an interest in their culture and their background, it just connects you even more so.
So let's
And
talk about a minute for cultural intelligence.
okay.
As you prepared for your trips overseas, how did you get educated about some of the cultural norms, things you should do, you shouldn't do, things you
For
should
sure.
say? Because sometimes you don't even know you're walking on landmines and you're
Yeah,
trying
for
to do
sure. Well, it's so important. One of the things, well, let me just back up with, as it relates to cultural intelligence, it's actually one of the courses that I teach. And it's one of the ones that I'm so excited about, because being able to see the students, like the light bulb come on as it relates to what culture is and all of that. And so it really is educating yourself prior to. So, for example, I just came back from a trip to Portugal and to Monaco, to the Côte d'Azur, south of France. And before I even left, one of the things that I did, my sister-in-law is actually from Portugal. So I had a little session with her, what are the main things? Where should we go? Like, what are some of the norms? And then also learning just some basics. Like, whenever I travel, it's, hello, do you speak English?
support.
Please and thank you.
Mhm.
So it's like, bom dia, right? In Portugal, like, hello and obrigado, thank you, right?
Mhm.
And so it's like just learning those basics. And the funny thing about that is, as I would be talking to people, this one instant, the lady just starts like full on speaking Portuguese to me. And I'm like, no, like that's all I know. And she's like, oh my gosh, your accent, like it's just so perfect. So those kinds of things, just the little nuances. I mean, even if you just have 5 words, just the basics. So I always do that whatever country that I plan to go to. And it makes a huge difference.
Very important. Thank you. I think we all can do it for every nation we visit.
Oh, for
Hello, and
sure.
what a difference the world would be.
It does. It makes a big difference.
You
And
know, we,
people appreciate it, too,
yeah,
because it's like even if you ask them in their language, if they speak English, as opposed to just going up to them and speaking English to them, I mean, the reaction is just night and day.
it's really coming to where people are. And so when you talk about global leadership, I think in people's minds, they often see it as power over somebody, being able to make decisions that impact everyone. You have sort of a different lens. Do you want to share that with us, how you view global leadership?
So, one of the other classes that I teach, and, you know, when I talk about like teaching and educating, for me, a
Mhm.
classroom is not just about getting information, but
Mhm.
it's about exposure, right? And just getting people to see a different way of things, getting more information to things that they may not know. So my posture really is, another class that I teach is called is a leadership course.
Mhm.
And with that, I always talk about the core to being a positive, effective leader is self-reflexivity,
Mm.
right? So always looking within, looking at yourself, putting the mirror up at yourself as to, how am I showing up in the world? And so when I look at leadership, leadership can be at any level. And a
Mhm.
lot of times people look at leadership as a title, and to me it really isn't, because you can be a leader in the first grade to the kindergarten kids, right? You can be a leader in middle school. You can be a leader at any level in school, in your community. So it doesn't mean that you have like a certain position or title. It just means that you can effectively, have a position where you can empower and engage and mobilize, people, or strengthen people, like right where you are. And so to me also, leadership is about service, right? It's about connecting with people. It's about being able to influence and creating an impact, not having power and, knocking people over the heads, like, and then the other piece as a leader is that leaders should also be willing to jump in and do whatever you're asking the people that are around you, that you're mobilizing, to do. So you're serving together and
Mhm.
not them serving you, just saying, okay, this is what we're going to do. So that's why my approach, I feel, is like really just very different.
So, can you give an example of how you've done that in your career?
Wow. I mean,
Yeah.
I feel like I've been able to do that at many different levels. And I don't think that I recognize the posture that I have for leadership until, man, maybe, in my 30s, I would say. And it's like I was doing it, leadership, and not really putting a name or really understanding like what it was.
Mhm.
One of the examples I can talk about is like really within my community, in New Jersey, for example.
Mhm.
Being there and working with my faith family, in fellowship. And so they're always like, different events and different things that they would have. And there's one of the events annually is like Friends and Family Day. And
Mhm.
so one of the things that we would do is kind of mobilize the people within the church to reach out to the community, let them know that, we're having a day. We want to, fellowship with you, celebrate with you. And so reaching out to people beyond just, like our core. And so with that, it would be like getting the family together, making phone calls, like telling
Mhm.
people, being we would have it, outdoors, where we'd have barbecues, so we'd have food, we have the balloon bounce for the kids, and then giving out like backpacks and things for kids to go back to school. So really meeting people where they are, right?
Mhm.
And addressing the needs. And so you feed them, right? You give them supplies. Like these are things
Mhm.
that are like real life needs that people have to have. And so it's like if you mobilize your community around
Right.
fellowshipping with people, and then meeting the need, it's priceless.
Well, I think you're hitting on something that's really important, and is that you don't have to have that professional capacity. It can be in your own personal life where you
For
develop
sure.
skills, like you mentioned, through your religious organizations. I always know there's like the mayor of the community, the mayor of the block.
Yeah. My grandfather was that person.
This is where you inherited, it's in your DNA, but it gives everybody has the opportunity to develop that skill.
Absolutely, for sure. And so one of the things that, my grandfather would always say would be, how do you want to show up in the world and how do you represent your family name? Right. So his last name was Stanford, for example.
Mm-hmm.
And so I knew, like, wherever I went in the community, if I dropped that last name, it was like, oh, because he created such a, um, a name that was like exceptional, honest, honorable, like, just this really great thing. And so, you could just kind of drop it anywhere and people would just, whatever you need, kind of, open arms. But he created that. And so it's not so much just for your legacy for your family, but it's like, what legacy do you want to create for yourself as an individual and how you want to show up? And so one of the questions that I have for the audience for you guys to think about when we have our Q&A part is, what border, whether it's physical, professional, or personal, have you challenged in your own journey? So that's like something that I always put out there, even in my classes, asking my students so that they can have, something to just really think about.
Question. So you've had pretty remarkable career. It's taken you again as not only across continents, but across different ecosystems. And you had here 3 months that changed my perspective. And you've often talked to me about what happened in Kenya, and it's influencing some of your career decisions that you're doing now. Why don't you share with us a little bit about that time?
Wow, that was 2007, which is quite a long time, almost 20 years. I mean, but it feels like it was just yesterday. And so I was living in New York and working with a women's maternity, like outreach residents. And we were doing personal and professional development programs for them. And when I tell you the work and just the connection, I was like, I have got to do this for the rest of my life. Like this, it was so impactful to me. I mean, we're, supposed to be impacting the ladies. Well, they impacted us. And so I reached out to my network and said, anybody that knows anybody that's doing women's empowerment globally, like, let me know. So one of my best girlfriends who I went to college with, she said, well, my mother-in-law is an MP. She's a member of parliament in Kenya, and she does women's empowerment, and she's coming to DC. Why don't you come for a visit? Well, say less, right? So it's like I got here to DC immediately and spend, a weekend with her and the family. And, immediately meeting her mother-in-law, she said, come home with me. I said, yeah, but you live in Africa. Like, it's not like, you live in another state. And so she's exactly like you take the jump on the metro or even on Amtrak, right? And just get. And so she said, look, I leave in a couple of weeks, but it's an open invitation. So whenever you get an opportunity, just, come on. And so I was able to, and I shadowed her as an MP, but also as, a woman from the village, in a small village from Kenya who got a scholarship and went to Harvard, got her PhD in the 70s, which was like insane. And, she did a lot of work within her community. So she came back, and that's what a lot of times they do, come back to the community, but then she would come back here, and do work. And so it changed my entire like thought process about leadership, about life, about community, because I was in the trenches with her, in the villages, but also going to like the different embassies, because as a member of parliament, she had to interface and interact with, embassies and different people from, different countries. So it was actually so um, kind of polar, because on the one hand we'd be at the diplomatic functions and interacting with ambassadors and different things, and then on the other hand we'd be in the village and there's like a fire pit in the in the ground and the outhouse, so it really just taught me though that across all of those, whether we were in the embassy or the village, it's like community, it's connection, it's respect. It's like the thing, it's the same everywhere you go. It's just a matter of which entity. But I really just learned so many important lessons about the leadership, because as it related to community, the people are more important than the process, or more important than the program. They're so resilient, right? Having innovation. They had like women's SACOs there where, the women would pool their monies together and create businesses. There was connection and relationship around, the foundations, the organizations, the people, and then just really the hope, which was just so incredible, because you could see the young people there. They were just so excited to go to school. They wanted to learn, they wanted change, and and looked forward to that. So it was just really impactful and just incredible, and it just really gave me a lot of food for thought, especially with the self-reflexivity, right? I was able to to put that into my toolkit for moving forward. So
what I love is that you have a bullet about resilience, and that innovation thrives even with limited resources. We all need $1 million to accomplish something, but you learned that you don't have to do that. Can you describe a little bit how that came about? How, first of all, you learned that lesson, and an example of how it actually occurred.
Yeah, it's so humbling, right? Because it's like we're here and we think that there's just like we need this or we need whatever else. And I mean, they're, just milk, eggs, the basics are something that they really don't, in certain areas have. And so one of the things that was so humbling to me is that we went one day to just go deliver just the basics, to this village. And we were all in, different vehicles. And then we literally had to get out of the cars and walk because the road ended and we couldn't drive. And so we had to traverse through this, terrain or whatever. And we get into the, to the village, and the people welcomed us, had us come in. They've got these like clay homes and, like small furniture, and they served us tea in the middle of nowhere. And we're like, we're coming here to like bless and serve you. And I mean, the fact that, they would just take what they had, what little they had, right, and created something just so precious, I mean, and so priceless, that really taught me, like, they just keep going. And then the thing in that village is that most of the kids, the children in the village were taken care of by their grandparents, because most of their parents had died of AIDS, HIV and AIDS. Right. So, that was a whole nother kind of thing. So the fact that they were resilient to be able to like, okay, we're going to raise these children. We're going to, put them to work. We're going to show them that, we can make something out of nothing, and still make it great. It was just really incredible. So that was like the one lesson of the resilience that I saw in action.
It's a great story, Michelle. And as you said, young people are eager to lead and create change. And even if you come from very little, you can change the world.
Absolutely.
So, the power of cultural immersion, it's always interesting. People think they've gotten immersed in society when they go and they hang out in a village or they talk to people, but it requires something even more than that. Would you
For
like to take a
sure.
deeper dive into that whole process?
Yeah, I mean, I think, yes, I think that learning through experience is
Mhm.
just really essential. I mean, even when you're learning a language and they talk about immersion, right? It's almost like when you're learning to swim, you just, throw you in the pool. And you're like, either you sink or you're going to swim, right? And so I really believe that that experience and travel really teaches the lesson, right? And like I had mentioned, the first international trip that I took to the Bahamas, it's like, even if I looked at that in a book, it's not engaging with the people, the local people. It's not eating the food. It's not listening to the dialogue.
Mhm.
And it's not, interacting with the different generations of people, which is another thing that's just kind of so profound, because if you look, depending on the culture, it's like, you have 3 and 4 generations all being together, a part of community, right? And so that may be different in one country than it is in another.
Mhm.
And really, through this global engagement is allowed me to have different perspectives, and realizing that the diversity really fuels innovation, right? Because, I mean, even if it's within the United States, right? We're in someone from California or Seattle versus someone from Texas or Louisiana, right? The cultures and the norms are very different. So if you're working on an initiative, it's so important to get everybody's perspective because it's different, right?
Mhm.
And then that helps to have more creativity, more ideas, and different ways of operating, and really listening. My sister always talks about, she's like, I don't think people really listen, I
Mhm.
mean, not listen to understand, not listen to like really get it. And so it really builds trust. And one of the things that I really try to do is, when listening and someone's telling me a story or giving a piece, or even if it's a name, I'll repeat it back, because then the person is like, oh, she really is interested in what I'm saying. And, just having a sense of humanity, just being human in the way that you interact with people, being gracious, being generous. When you're walking past someone, say hello. I mean, give them a smile. I mean, people just walk past each other like, and say nothing. So humanity really creates meaningful partnerships, and, just allows that trust and just building that foundation.
It's really interesting that you use the word listen. It's the catchword for the summer if anyone's seen the Steven Spielberg movie. And I think may people may listen. This is important too. People may listen, but they may not be hearing you.
Hmm.
And I think we have to do a better job of that. I don't know if it can be taught, but it certainly can be brought to the forefront of your mind, so you're more conscious when you're
Well, I
doing that.
think, yeah, well, for sure. And then that, when I was talking about self-reflexivity,
Yes.
right?
Mhm.
Once it's not just being reflective and just going, oh, okay. It's being reflective, seeing what can be adjusted, and then doing something about that.
Right.
Right. And so you'll see, the leadership insight that I like to say is that the best
Mhm.
leaders remain lifelong learners. And so if you're not good at listening, practice it. Right. And
Right.
be mindful and be intentional about it. So, yes, for sure. To your point, some things you can't just, outright teach somebody, but if it's something that you are committed to doing and you want to expand and become, you know, a better person,
Mhm.
not just a better leader, but it's like, as you develop as a person, your leadership skills increase as well. So,
Point. Wonderful point.
mhm,
So as you go to your next slide, you talk about education as a global force for change. It comes back to being lifelong leaders, right?
for
Um,
sure.
The point about thinking critically is very important. I have to say, I have my concerns these days. I love the fact that we've got AI, we've got our assisted devices, we've got, the use of new technology. But my concern is that people are going to become so addicted to it that they're not going to develop parts of their brain that are needed for critical thinking. And, there may be a blackout one day where you don't have access, or you're in that village in Kenya and you don't have those resources. Can you talk about some of your bullet points here, but really focus on the issue of thinking critically, because I don't want us to outsource that, because I think it's essential for what we need to do to live, to be leaders.
For sure. Well, my work as an educator at the Chicago School, I really have the privilege of helping students, with their development. And so not only just developing their leadership skills, but developing as a person. And critical thinking is a key factor, right? And allowing them to apply knowledge for real world changes, and also to be ethical, right, in their life. And then that carries out to your professionalism, right? And just knowing that education is really one of the most powerful tools for social transformation. And as it relates to critical thinking within, the teaching and the development, there are different programs and things that I try to put together for students to be able to think critically, right? To just give them that platform and that space. And so even if we do have protocols for AI and, all of that within the university. And a lot of it with the critical thinking comes through the interaction, right? So you can write a paper, you can get AI to help you with that. But then when we're interfacing and talking and, going through different things, whether it be on via Zoom or in the classroom, in person, it's like I charge them with different questions, have them charge each other, to be able to exercise that part of their brain, because it is essential for sure.
It's a really good point about exercise the brain. You have to continually train it, right? And
yes,
I love the idea that you're giving them real life examples that they have to game out to figure how to address it. Because when you're traveling, when you're going around the world, like I said, you may not have those resources, and you need to be able to handle those scenarios.
For sure.
And to assume your leadership role by doing that. So it's important.
For sure. And I mean, I love that with the Chicago School, they give us that opportunity and a platform. And so it's not just about the scholarship. It's not just about, what you're reading in the books and, what you're reading online. It's like, okay, so let's talk about this leadership style, or let's talk about this leadership case study. So how does this happen? How does this play out in the real world? Right. So we do that consistently because, you can have all of the intel, the information, but if you can't execute and do it in the real world, then it's not really effective.
Really important. So almost like a critical thinking boot camp.
Yeah, I like that. Maybe look, that's a great idea. Maybe we should create that.
We could do it on Earth and in space.
So yeah, for sure. For sure.
So speaking of space, you are the Director of Global Affairs for SolaMed Solutions. Can you tell our audience what your contribution is to that arena, and what drives you to be interested in it?
For sure. I'm so excited. I love, this role. And I remember when you actually came to me about the role, right? And I was a little nervous because I'm saying, I don't know a whole lot about space, but, I know about the global environment. But the thing again, as an emerging leader, right, and a lifelong learner, I said, this is something that affects all of us, right? The space arena. And it's something that, from a global perspective, I mean, you're doing all of these things that I had talked about, in terms of engagement, creative ideas and all of that. And so I really wanted to have the opportunity to learn more about the arena, and also like how I can collaborate with you and SolaMed and everybody on the team to make an impact. And so with that, as a director, I try to contribute to conversations that focus on sustainable development, global partnerships, community engagement, like we talked about, international collaborations. We're doing one right now today, right? And just knowing that true impact happens when organizations and communities just work together toward a shared goal, right?
And you have a new program, which you're going to share in this slide, that really embodies all that. First of all, tell everybody if you remember what Galaxy stands for.
Oh my gosh. Put me on the spot with that.
Everything in the space community has an acronym.
Yeah.
Last year, we're working at NASA. I carried like my acronym Bibles to understand.
Right. Yeah. So this initiative came about because, we wanted to look at how we can impact or educate girls, particularly in Africa, because, that's kind of like a baseline and where I have inroads. And knowing that girls in Africa are not necessarily looked at in terms of education, they're overlooked, right? And so because of the inroads, with Africa, I thought that that would be, a good place to start. And being able to create a program that would empower them to be able to have the opportunity to, work, whether it's in STEM, technology, and just doing some leadership development, space exploration, mentorship, and global citizenship. So with the Galaxy Stars Initiative, what we're trying to do is we're looking at girls between 10 and 14, because, that's kind of that age where they're kind of deciding, right, and their brain development. And so we want to give an opportunity to show that there are unlimited possibilities, for these girls. And so that's kind of how the initiative, came together. And we're working again, doing collaborations with other organizations that have, like inroads in those areas, or just different things in terms of the programs that we want to put together that can partner with us to, to promote it. So we're excited about it.
And it's a wonderful opportunity for organizations all across the globe to get involved, especially if they want to have their boots on the ground in Africa, and then we can take it across the globe, including the global south. So thank you for spearheading it, Michelle.
Sure.
So you talked already a little bit about why it's so important to reach girls, young women, and perhaps you can take a little more in-depth look at why leadership skills are so important for this age group and for this social determinant.
Yeah, and yes, and it's interesting because it's not like we're not focusing on boys, but girls, especially in other countries, like I had mentioned, just get overlooked as it relates to being educated. And so that's one of the reasons why, girls are so important, and then the other reason too is that every girl deserves an opportunity to, dream boldly, to lead, to be able to explore new things, and when girls are empowered, their entire communities benefit. Because girls, a lot of times, because they have a lot to overcome, will work harder, will find ways, be innovative and creative. And so we're looking to be able to allow them to see that they can be scientists, they can be educators, entrepreneurs, policymakers, global leaders. And so that's, really why the push, with the girls.
Such an important age, because I think it really sets the foundation for how you see your life. And
For
if you have really strong role models at that time, it can set you on a course that literally you could reach for the stars, which is what you're recommending that we do here.
Yeah, yes. And the thing that like I had mentioned, we're starting with Africa. However, the notion and the desire is to just reach girls around the world, right? So we're just starting with in one area, but we would like to pilot it there. And as we grow, I'm not going to say if, because I know we're going to grow and it's going to develop into something wonderful. We'll be able to take that model and just be able to share it with other organizations in other countries. And so The vision really is to have them just reach for the stars, right? They'll be able to experience virtual space missions, learn from some global mentors. We have some partners that, do space camps and different things like that. They'll be able to develop leadership skills because they'll be working in teams. One of the components of the program that we're looking at is to do kind of like a pen pal. So the girls in Africa will be partnered with girls in the US and be able to, share information and be able to collaborate together, build confidence around the STEM, and also, be able to connect with their peers worldwide, not just for inspiration, but also to really just inspire them and then to see what possibilities are out there and available.
It's a really strong platform, and especially when you're at the beginning, you should reach for the stars. I think that's an important lesson for everybody. Don't shoot low, shoot high.
Exactly.
And for people in our audience, feel free to provide any comments or questions in your chat box, because hopefully we'll be able to get to them, because I hope this is inspiring some new thoughts for you to consider. So let's talk about something that I think it's always at the tip of everyone's mind, is the role of peace and leadership. Mm-hmm. And for you as a UN Global Peace Ambassador, I know you have some very strong thoughts about this.
I do. The thing is, it's like, if you really think about it, in just really basic terms, it's not that difficult, right? But a lot of times we make it really challenging. And so leadership that builds understanding, right? It doesn't mean that we always have to agree on things, but being able to be heard, number one, and to be able to understand another person's perspective. And doing that, respect, inclusion, having dialogue, that cultural understanding that we talked about earlier is so super important. And the leaders of our world, this is the way that they can really be bridge builders, and to just bridge the gap.
Well, I think if we were talking about earlier, if we all learned how to play football, and I'm not talking about what we call here in the United States.
The real football, right?
And maybe we could bridge world peace, because we have a shared theme. This is where everyone could come together. So
for sure,
throw that out there as far as leadership skills. We develop our brains, but also our ability to kick a ball.
Right.
So what I've known about you is you are a true Francophile. And not only do you speak the language, you sing it as well. Why don't you share a little bit about that perspective of your love for France and how it's...
Oh my gosh. So when I was in college, in undergrad, I was a fashion major. And so in my mind, the only natural progression was to move to France. And so I was able to, to get a scholarship and got my master's degree, as you mentioned earlier, and living there for 2 years. I mean, in the beginning, it was a little painful because I didn't speak French. So, but it was like the culture, the food, the people, it was just all so exciting and so inspiring, and I was just curious about, the different areas, and I got to learn not just, Paris, but all of France. I was able to travel with one of the jobs that I had. And then because everything is so close, travel to other countries. And so, just knowing that language is more than just words, right? It's, as I talked about earlier, a pathway to relationship and global citizenship. So I'm just a huge proponent of that.
Well, we know bonjour, merci beaucoup.
Bonjour, merci.
Let's quickly go through, I love the way you do alliteration, the characteristics, and you use it as the C's. So just quickly mention that, because we've got a whole host of questions to get to.
Oh, wow. Okay. What am I quickly mentioning? I'm sorry.
You're going to mention the characteristics of global changemakers.
Oh, yes. Okay. So what future leaders need: courage to step into unfamiliar spaces, curiosity, as I mentioned, to seek understanding, compassion, serving others, collaboration to solve complex challenges, and a commitment to leave the world better than you found it.
That is a beautiful point, and we all need to know about that because we can do it even in our local communities, even if
For
just picking
sure.
up trash that's around us, or just
Absolutely.
environment better than the way you found it. Let's go to your call to action.
Yes. So, my call to action to everyone, and I say this to my students and I'm sharing it with you all as well, is to become a leader beyond your borders, right? You don't need a title, you don't need a large platform, or unlimited resources. You simply need purpose, vision, courage, the action, and the world is waiting for leaders who are willing to think beyond borders. They're waiting for you. We're waiting for you. So that's my call to action.
Wouldn't it be wonderful just to for people to write that down today and then come back and revisit it? Because as you evolve, it may evolve, but your North Star hasn't changed. So what are some of your final reflections?
Final reflection. So if you're thinking beyond borders, again, leadership is not measured by how many people you follow or people follow you. It's measured by how many people are empowered and impacted because of you. So if we educate minds, engage cultures, create opportunities, invest in next generation, then we do more than create leaders. We're really creating global change makers. And so I really like to say that the future belongs to those who are willing to cross boundaries, to embrace differences, empower others to shine. And so together we can build a world where leadership truly knows no borders.
Michelle, it's a really profound statement. And I'd recommend that LinkedIn, instead of doing followers, they should have who empowers.
Empowers, exactly.
And how you actually have that impact, not just following along, but how
Exactly.
So we're moving into our questions and conversational side right now. We're going to do this as a lightning round. So I'm going to ask a question that's been put to our audience or generated from our audience.
Okay.
And I have that in front of you, but it will be very fast. So
okay. Rapid fire. Here we go.
Fire. Love doing it. So our first question is, how do you stay true to your values while leading across different cultures?
Wow. Now that is very tricky. For me, it's really just based in, kind of like my faith. And that's something that has always kind of been at the core. And, Sarah can attest to that, because, we'll talk about different things as it relates to that. So that's really the way that I'm able to stay true and just really not allow other people or outside influences to change that. Because I have to have my inner compass.
You have your inner compass.
Comfortable with myself, right? For sure.
Bottom line. Second question, what is your opinion on online education? Do you think it will completely replace face-to-face education?
I love both because I do both, right?
Hybrid.
So I do online and I do in person, and I love them both. But, the way the world is changing, it might go to just virtually online, which would be sad. But I think that there will still be opportunities for in person, right? So even if it's not consistent, I think that there will still be that platform for sure. But online is definitely, emerging even more so.
Let's give it
we can still make impact. Mm-hmm.
Right. Given us
sure.
flexibility, but I have to admit, I kind of miss the curbside consults. So maybe if we provided some way at the end of formal presentations where people could just kind of mingle virtually, even though you can't see each other. And then in the future world, we'll go to 4-dimension and we're just going to project ourselves into those.
Right. Maybe we'll do like a lounge, like a virtual lounge cafe, right?
We'll have our analog or our holograms to.
Yeah, there it is.
So how can young people become global leaders without leaving their own communities?
Wow, they can just work with the leaders within your community. So whether it's a mosque or, a church or whatever your faith-based community, working with people within that area, or, if you're in like a gated type community or like wherever you are, whoever those people, like I was saying, my grandfather, he was the mayor of the town, but unofficially, but it's like everybody knew him. So it's just really kind of latching on to people who you see are making an impact. And the thing is, it's like they love to have people, especially young people that they can mentor, and to just kind of shadow them and follow them around and say, Mr. Such and such, what are you getting into, and, just being shadowing them.
And what's really interesting also is so many local organizations have global presence now. They have regional offices.
For
So if
sure.
someone's really interested, they could maybe select a group that has that opportunity where they're mentored locally, but
Yes.
visually they're seeing the globe. So
For sure.
it's an interesting world that we're in.
Absolutely.
So I'm going to have you come back to the words you just shared with us. And that is, you often say, each one, right? Each one,
reach one, teach one.
So what does that philosophy mean to you personally?
So it really just means, grabbing hold of somebody, right? Whether it's a sibling, whether it's a neighbor, so that every one person can reach another person and teach them something, right? Like when you're kids, you learn how to tie your shoe, right? You learn how to cross the street, whatever it is that you may know or the information that you may have, you can always share that. It's really just being able to share something, even if it's a little nugget, with somebody else, sharing information, sharing what you know, sharing knowledge. So that's essentially what it means. Yeah.
So it's not that you have to share the theory of relativity. It can be
exactly.
Something you think is basic, but it can be really powerful for others.
Exactly, for sure.
So you mentioned that understanding people from different backgrounds is now a leadership advantage. Was there ever a time when that understanding opened a door for you that nothing else would?
Oh, that's a great question. Wait, ask me that again. I gotta get my brain wrapped around that one. That was a good one. Now say that again.
So, you mentioned that understanding people from different backgrounds is now a leadership advantage, right? So was there ever a time when that understanding opened a door for you that nothing else could?
Wow. Let me think about that for a second. Yes. Okay. So I had a situation where I had a friend who was Russian. And we actually, another little fun fact, I'm also a salsera, so meaning I love salsa dancing. So we didn't talk about that, but yes. And so, yes, so within the salsa community, one of my friends was from Russia. And so she taught me, just some little buzz phrases or, whatever. And so when in one of my former roles, I was in the marketing department and I worked for an accounting firm, and we would have to do like different taxes or whatever else. And so they assigned me to one of our other offices. Well, the woman in the office, the main head person, was Russian. And so just having that little piece, those little words and greetings, I was able to connect with her. And that got me a different role. Like they put me over this project. She had me working with her. I mean, it would have never happened if I hadn't connected with her on that level. So that's a perfect example.
It's funny how even little things can make a difference, right?
So, I mean, she was shocked. She was like, how do you know this? Like, I don't even Russian is not one of those languages that people just run out and, necessarily learn. Right. And so she was just really floored. And the fact that every day, and then she would teach me, little phrases, and we would have interaction back and forth. But just that little, having that from one world to bring it into another made
I love that. So everybody needs to stay aware of what goes on in their own lives. So let's take you to the next question. You say the best leaders remain lifelong learners. What are you still learning right
now? Hang on. We went offline for 1 second. So say that question again.
You say that the best leaders remain lifelong learners. And what are you still learning right now? And what's the next thing you want to understand better? And hopefully you'll stay space.
No, that's the thing I want to understand better, right?
Yes.
Because that's a definite progression for me. And one thing that I'm actually learning is Portuguese.
Oh,
So, yep,
oh. So that you
yep.
can go back to Portugal and to
So I can
Brazil.
go back and yes, and speak better, and then also tighten up my French because when I was there, it wasn't as great as I thought it was going to be. So I'm
Thanks
like,
for,
I gotta brush up on that. So those are the three things:
fortunately,
one language, the two languages, and then the space is continued. Yeah,
wonderful. Unfortunately, DC has a great space museum and wonderful Portuguese and French restaurants. We'll do.
absolutely.
So our final question is, you worked in many countries. Is there a common thread you've noticed across all these cultures, something that connects people everywhere? It's a great way to end.
Beside food, yeah.
It's a great connection.
Humanity,
Mhm.
humanity. Like everywhere that I have gone, just again, language opening the door, and people just the fact that you show that you care and that you have an interest and that you come humble, right?
Mhm.
That's one of the things that's so critical. When you go to another country, don't go like, a bull in the china shop. Go very humble, go very gracious, go with the humanity, connect with people. And the thing that has just the thread throughout is that people have been just so wonderful. I mean, I've had really great experiences with people just, embracing me, loving up on me, making me a part of their culture, so like I'm Kenyan, you know, what do you call it? Portuguese, French, so it's like I'm all of the part of these communities. So whenever I go to any of these places, it's like it's home.
I
It's
love
home.
that. I love that.
Yeah.
Become part of the culture.
Become a part of the culture.
I've often said that if we're really met by non-human intelligence, the so-called ETs, aliens, then we're all going to be Earthlings. We're not going to see any borders because we belong to this planet that we can
For
greet others.
sure.
So,
Absolutely.
coming to the end, do you have like one closing statement you want to share with our audience?
I would just, again, I'm so grateful that we've had the opportunity, like Sarah had mentioned, we've been friends for such a long time, friends and colleagues. So I'm really excited to be able to share this and to do this together. And also, just knowing again, as you move around in your communities, just letting love to just lead. Let love lead. We're going to have differences. We're not going to agree on things, but let that lead and just have respect and humanity for people. And the last piece I would say is just that self-reflexivity. Continue to just look at yourself and say, how do I want to show up in the world? Right. And knowing that service is the rent that we pay to live on this planet.
It's a beautiful statement. So, Her Excellency, Ambassador, Dr., and I'm going to call you Michelle, my colleague and friend. I want to thank you. You started out with hello, and you mentioned how important thank you is to our everyday lexicon. So I want to
For
thank
sure.
you, all the languages on this beautiful planet, for sharing your wisdom and your time with us today. And I know the audience will probably be reaching out to you to glean more of your wisdom, and access will be provided. And I want to thank this organization, Beyond Space, for making this possible so that we can all live in peace together. Thank you, everyone.
Absolutely. Thank you, everybody.